Some places don't look dangerous. They look warm, welcoming, safe. That was the first mistake every man made when he saw Milbrook Inn. It sat high in the Kentucky mountains where the wilderness road twisted like a snake through rock and forest. Travelers reached that stretch of road exhausted, half frozen in winter, sunburned in summer, and always grateful to see smoke curling from the Cunningham chimney. 4 sisters ran the inn, and men said staying there felt like coming home, even if they had no home left to return to. Teamsters swore the beds were softer than any they'd slept in east of the mountains. Merchants praised the food, rich stews, fresh bread, honey cakes that tasted like something out of childhood. Hunters bragged about the sisters' kindness more than their own trophies. But what men remembered most was the way the sisters made them feel. Seen, understood, wanted. Lonely widowers extended their stays. Young adventurers forgot their schedules. Hardened traders who trusted no one suddenly found themselves sharing life stories by the fire. And then, in the winter of 1851, people began to notice something strange. Wagons were being found abandoned along the mountain road. Horses wandered into settlements without riders. Supply caravans arrived missing a man or two, with no one able to explain where they'd gone. At first, folks blamed bandits, or wolves, or the mountains themselves, because the wilderness was always hungry. But as the disappearances added up, one detail kept surfacing. The missing men had all been heading toward the same place, Milbrook Inn. Before we uncover what really happened in those mountains, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this don't stay buried forever, because to understand the horror, we have to go back 20 years earlier, back to 1831. That was the year Jeremiah Cunningham died and left his mountain empire to his 4 daughters. Margaret, the eldest, had her father's mind for business, sharp, practical, and cold when necessary. Catherine possessed a beauty so effortless, it disarmed suspicion before it could form. Sarah knew the secrets of mountain plants, roots, and herbs, remedies for pain, and things far less merciful. And Elizabeth, the youngest, had a softness about her that made strangers trust her within minutes. Together, they inherited more than land. They inherited isolation, 800 acres of mountain wilderness, a well-built inn on the most dangerous road west, and no neighbors close enough to hear a scream. At first, the sisters simply kept the business running, and they were good at it. Very good. Travelers spread the word quickly. The Cunningham sisters offered the finest hospitality in the frontier. But isolation does strange things to people, especially people who realize how easily the outside world can lose track of a single traveler. It was a freezing night in November of 1832 when Thomas Kellerman rode up the mountain path. He was 45, recently widowed, traveling alone with a heavy purse of gold meant for cattle purchases in Kentucky. Margaret noticed the weight of his saddlebags. Catherine noticed the loneliness in his eyes. Sarah noticed how tired he looked. Elizabeth noticed how easily he smiled when she laughed. By the end of his 3rd night at Milbrook Inn, Thomas Kellerman believed he had found comfort, companionship, and maybe even a reason to start living again. By the end of the week, no one would ever see him alive again, and the sisters would discover something far more valuable than gold. They would discover how easy it was to make a man disappear. Thomas Kellerman should have left at dawn. That had been his plan. He'd said it himself over breakfast on his 4th morning at Milbrook Inn. Kentucky couldn't wait. Business came first. He'd already stayed longer than he meant to. But plans have a way of softening in warm places, especially when someone is sitting across from you, smiling like you matter. Catherine poured his coffee that morning, her fingers brushing his for just a second longer than necessary. Not bold, not improper, just enough to make a lonely man hesitate. "You must be tired of the road," she said gently. Another day of rest wouldn't ruin Kentucky. Margaret said nothing, but she listened. Sarah watched how much sugar he used, a small detail stored away. Elizabeth laughed at a story he'd already told twice. By afternoon, Thomas Kellerman had convinced himself that one more night was not a delay. It was a gift. That evening, snow fell softly over the mountains, blanketing the wilderness road in quiet white. Inside, the inn glowed with firelight and warmth. Other travelers had moved on. Kellerman was the only guest left. Exactly as Margaret preferred it. After supper, Catherine invited him to sit by the hearth. She brought spiced rum, warm just enough to chase away the mountain chill. They spoke in low voices while wind brushed the shutters. He told her about his late wife, how the house felt too large now, how silence could feel heavier than noise. Catherine listened the way only she could, eyes steady, voice soft, never interrupting at the wrong moment. When she touched his hand, it felt natural, comforting, like something he hadn't known he needed. Upstairs, Margaret closed the ledger for the night. Sarah stood at the kitchen table, grinding dried herbs with slow, careful pressure. Elizabeth watched from the doorway, quiet for once. No one spoke about what was happening. They didn't need to. Much later, Catherine helped Kellerman to his room. He was drowsy, relaxed, trusting, the kind of trust that only comes when a person believes they are safe. In the kitchen below, Sarah rinsed a small ceramic cup and placed it back on the shelf among dozens of others. By morning, Thomas Kellerman did not come down for breakfast. Margaret knocked first. Calm, polite, no answer. She called for Ezra Hawthorne, their foreman, and together they opened the door. Kellerman lay in bed, blankets pulled to his chest, face pale but peaceful. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture. Just a man who looked as though he had slipped quietly from one sleep into another. Heart gave out, Ezra muttered, hat in hand. Mountains do that sometimes. Margaret nodded, already thinking ahead. They buried him that afternoon on a quiet rise behind the inn, in the small family cemetery where weathered stones leaned at tired angles. A simple marker, a respectful service. No one passing through would question it. Travelers died on the frontier all the time. What mattered was that no one would come looking quickly. Inside the house that night, the sisters gathered at the kitchen table. A leather purse sat in the center, heavy with gold coins. No one smiled. This wasn't joy. It was understanding. Margaret divided the money into neat stacks. We space things out, she said calmly. No patterns, no greed. Sarah nodded. No suffering, she added quietly, as if that mattered. Catherine stared into the fire, her expression unreadable. Elizabeth asked the only question that lingered in the room. Will it always feel like this? Margaret didn't look up. It gets easier. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the fresh earth on Kellerman's grave. By spring, no trace of him would remain on the mountain, except in the memory of 4 sisters who had just learned a life-changing truth. The world did not keep track of every man, and in a place as remote as Milbrook Inn, no one was watching. All right, now the pattern begins. Winter buried the mountains in silence, but inside Milbrook Inn, life moved with careful precision. The sisters did not speak of Thomas Kellerman again. They didn't have to. His absence became part of the house, like the creak in the stairwell or the draft near the kitchen door. Something noticed once, then accepted. By early spring, travelers returned to the wilderness road. Wagons creaked through melting snow. Horses splashed through thawing mud, and Milbrook Inn opened its doors wide once more. Margaret watched every arrival from the front window, not with excitement, with evaluation. A pair of families heading west, useless. A preacher and his sons, risky. 2 traders traveling together, complicated. But a single rider, well-dressed, expensive saddle, tired eyes. That was different. His name was Elias Turner, a land speculator from Virginia, 38. Unmarried, talkative in the way lonely men often are when someone finally listens. Catherine saw it first, the way his shoulders relaxed when she laughed at his jokes. Sarah noticed how he pushed aside half his supper, but drank every drop of her evening tea. Elizabeth learned, within minutes, that he had no close family and planned to be gone for months at least. Margaret heard all of it, and that night, for the first time, she brought out paper. If we're doing this, she said quietly at the kitchen table, we do it right. She began making columns. Name, origin, money, family, risk. Not emotional notes, business notes. Sarah didn't like seeing it written down. Paper can be found. Margaret met her eyes. Memory fades. That was the difference between an accident and an operation. Elias Turner stayed 4 nights, long enough to feel known, long enough to stop guarding his purse, long enough to believe Catherine meant it when she said she hoped he would come back. He left at dawn on the 5th day. He never reached the valley road. Ezra and Heinrich handled the rest with quiet efficiency. By sunset, the forest had taken him, the earth closed, and the trail told no stories. When the sisters counted the money that night, it was more than Kellerman had carried. No one hesitated now. Something had shifted, not in their actions but in their certainty. This could work, and if done carefully, it could last. Through 1833, they refined everything. Margaret developed rules. Never take a man expected somewhere on a specific date. Never take someone locals might recognize. Never act if other guests are present who might linger. Sarah perfected dosages, enough to weaken, never enough to cause alarm too soon. Her herb garden expanded, innocent to the eye. Mint, sage, foxglove hidden between. Catherine practiced personalities the way actors practice lines. Gentle for the grieving, playful for the boastful, intellectual for the educated. She became whatever reflection a man most wanted to see. Elizabeth's role grew too. She asked harmless questions with dangerous value. Do you have children? Is someone waiting for you back home? Will you be coming through again soon? Men answered easily. They always did. And Ezra became the voice of reassurance to the outside world. Yes, sir, he stayed here. Fine fellow. Left early. Said he was making good time. Mountains are dangerous this time of year. No one ever doubted a weathered old mountain man. By autumn, 3 more men had vanished into the ridges surrounding Milbrook Inn. No investigations. No patrols. No grieving families knocking at the door. Just the steady rhythm of wagons arriving. And some never leaving the mountains. One evening, as wind pressed against the shutters, Elizabeth stood at the window watching snow begin to fall again. Do you think God sees this place? She asked quietly. No one answered at first. Margaret finally spoke, her voice steady. God sees everything. Elizabeth swallowed. Then why hasn't he stopped us? Margaret didn't look up from the ledger. Because no one else has either. Outside, the wilderness road disappeared under fresh snow. And inside Milbrook Inn, the sisters stopped thinking of what they were doing as something temporary. It was simply the way life worked now. And they were very, very good at it. Love where this is going. Now we move from method to momentum. By 1836, Milbrook Inn was no longer just a stop along the wilderness road. It was a destination. Travelers spoke of it the way soldiers spoke of home. A place of warmth, of laughter, of comfort in a world that was mostly mud, hunger, and danger. That reputation was exactly what protected the sisters, because people rarely question a miracle, but miracles, when repeated too often, begin to look like patterns, and patterns attract attention. The first whisper came from a blacksmith in Lexington. He mentioned a trader named Owen Pike who had written letters describing the finest hospitality in the mountains and promising to return home with new business connections. He never arrived. The second whisper came from a widow in North Carolina asking a passing wagon train if anyone had seen her brother, Daniel Hurst, last known to be traveling west through Kentucky. A man in that wagon train remembered something. A place run by 4 sisters. Real kind. He said he might stay there a spell. The name of the inn wasn't remembered, but the description lingered. 4 sisters. Mountain Road. Too pleasant to forget. That spring, a man rode up to Milbrook Inn who did not fit their usual pattern. He introduced himself as Deputy Marshal Caleb Finch, mid-30s, clean-shaven, quiet eyes that missed very little. He claimed to be escorting a prisoner west, but the prisoner never appeared. Instead, he arrived alone, and stayed. Margaret felt it immediately. He asked questions the wrong way. Not curious. Careful. How long has the inn been in operation? You ladies run this place alone? Must get all sorts of travelers through here. Elizabeth tried her usual charm. He smiled, but his eyes stayed alert. Catherine tried warmth. He appreciated it, but never leaned in. Sarah served him tea. He didn't drink it. That had never happened before. That night, the sisters gathered in the kitchen after he went to bed. He's not here by accident, Margaret said. Ezra agreed. Rides like law. Watches like law. Sarah's voice was tight. Then we wait. We do nothing. Margaret shook her head slowly. If he leaves, he takes questions with him. Silence filled the room. For the first time in 5 years, they were not in control. The next evening, Finch surprised them. Instead of sitting alone, he joined them at supper. Funny thing, he said casually, cutting into his venison. I've been tracking reports of missing men along this road. Not bandits, no signs of struggle, just gone. Catherine tilted her head. The mountains swallow people. Sometimes, Finch agreed. But mountains don't usually take their horses too. Margaret kept her expression calm. You think someone's hunting travelers? I think, Finch said gently, that evil doesn't always look like evil. Elizabeth's fork trembled slightly. He noticed. That night, they didn't meet in the kitchen. They met in Margaret's room. If he reaches town, Sarah whispered, they'll come back with more men. He hasn't accused us, Elizabeth said, hopeful. Margaret's voice was firm. He doesn't need to accuse. He just needs to wonder out loud. Catherine looked pale for the first time in years. He's not like the others. No, Margaret said quietly. He's not. Near midnight, a soft knock came at Catherine's door. She opened it to find Finch standing there, hat in hand. Couldn't sleep, he said. Mind if I sit by the fire downstairs? She forced a gentle smile. Of course. As they sat together in the dim glow of dying embers, he studied her face. You're not what I expected, he said. From a mountain innkeeper? From someone who knows more than she says. Her heart pounded. Careful, she said softly. Mountains don't like being questioned. Finch gave a slow nod. And secrets, he replied, don't like staying buried. Upstairs, Margaret stood awake by the window, watching, waiting, knowing one thing with chilling certainty. By sunrise, either Caleb Finch would leave the mountain, or he never would. Yes. Now we bring it home with the fall. Dark, tense, and unforgettable. Margaret did not sleep. She sat in the chair by her bedroom window, watching the faint glow of dying embers in the common room below. Caleb Finch was still awake, still thinking, still breathing. That, she knew, could not continue. By dawn, everything they had built could be gone. The gold, the reputation, the carefully woven illusion of warmth and safety. All of it rested on one decision. Downstairs, Catherine kept Finch talking by the fire. She played her role beautifully. Soft voice, gentle eyes, quiet laughter at his dry humor. But for the first time since the killings began, she wasn't in control of the conversation. Finch wasn't opening up. He was listening. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked her suddenly. The mountains are home, she replied smoothly. Or a cage, he said. Her smile faltered for just a second. Upstairs, Margaret saw it through the railing. She turned away. It was time. In the kitchen, Sarah prepared a final cup of night tea. Stronger than usual. Faster than usual. Her hands trembled as she crushed the dried root. Last one, Elizabeth whispered beside her. Sarah didn't answer, because deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Catherine carried the tea to Finch with steady hands. For sleep, she said softly. Mountain nights can be restless. He looked at the cup, then at her. You first, he said. Time stopped. Elizabeth's breath caught from the hallway shadows. Margaret's knuckles turned white upstairs. Catherine forced a small laugh. You think I'd poison you? I think, Finch said quietly, that I haven't seen another guest leave this place since I arrived. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then Catherine did something no one expected. She drank. A small sip. Barely any, but enough. Finch watched carefully. Then took a drink of his own. Not much, but enough to pretend. They sat. The fire cracked. Minutes passed. Then Finch swayed slightly, like a man growing tired. Catherine swayed too, but her dizziness was real. Margaret realized too late. Catherine hadn't pretended well enough. She rushed downstairs just as Finch caught Catherine before she fell from her chair. You don't have the stomach for this, he said softly, lowering her to the floor. Sarah ran for the back door. Ezra burst in from outside with a rifle, but Finch was faster, drawing his revolver. Drop it, Finch ordered. Ezra hesitated. The shot echoed through the inn like thunder in a canyon. Ezra fell. Elizabeth screamed. Margaret stood frozen. The mountain, for the first time, had answered back. By sunrise, the illusion of Milbrook Inn was gone. Finch had ridden through the night to the nearest settlement, half sick from the poison but alive enough to speak. Men came back with him, armed, angry. Graves were opened. Caves were searched. Secrets clawed their way into daylight. The sisters were arrested before noon. Margaret never cried. Sarah never spoke again. Elizabeth wept for days. And Catherine, Catherine asked only one question as they led her away in chains. Did any of them love me, even a little? No one answered. Milbrook Inn was burned to the ground that winter. Locals said the smoke smelled strange, sweet, bitter, final. Travelers still pass through those Kentucky mountains, and sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, they say you can hear laughter, soft, welcoming, waiting. If this story gave you chills, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. More true dark history and forgotten mysteries are coming soon. And tell me in the comments, would you have trusted the Cunningham sisters?